with Bob Graves.
You are dads. I wish you a happy Father's Day. I indulged myself today with a movie and went out to a restaurant. Spent obscene buckaroos, but had a good time, and what have you. But we're all set to continue on tonight. Tonight, I want to talk about multi-axialism versus controversy. So, maybe I'm going to be a bit controversial. And as Joey told you, that I guess, I'm going to show you the side of me that's really kind of an unconventional bastard. Who knows? So, anyhow, we want to talk about this concept of multi-axialism and controversy. Now, part of the reason why I want to talk about this is not just because, well, it's fun to talk about or it's one of my favorite topics. I find it to be a relevantly important issue to the people who might be listening to this program, because many of the people who listen to this come from either a background where they were very religious, or they come from a background where they had to deal with a lot of people who were very, very religious, and it wasn't always an easy thing to do. And religious people tend to be, in my opinion, particularly narrow in their thinking. And as a result, they rarely engage in what I would call multi-axial thinking. By the way, I should add that it's not just religious people. Most people have difficulty being what I call multi-axial. It's just that religious people tend to be far more passionate about it. But I do find that it is something that is far more common. In fact, I think it's, for most people, a starting point. To learn to be multi-axial is something a person grows into after being monoaxial in their thinking. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And it is this kind of thinking that I see that really gives extra oomph and push to the impediment of certain controversies. And of course, as time goes on here in the show, I'm going to try to demonstrate that, not all controversies can be resolved. Some controversies will actually result in various forms of conundrums that might, thank you, wonderful wife brings me water. Oh, this time it's vodka. No, it's still water. But that some controversies can't be resolved by finding an answer. And most controversies that are resolved are usually resolved by not ending up taking either side. Rather, it ends up taking a position that is that includes an understanding and appreciation for the strong points from both sides of the issue prior, when it was still quite controversial, and then finally is resolved by everybody kind of broadening their thinking. Some controversies can quiet down unresolved, where people are able to accept the fact that there's just not really enough information available to resolve this. We have conflicting information or sparse information that, depending on how you're paying attention to it, might allow you to, guess at different situations and explanations. And if this is about something that's very important or very risky, or where decisions need to be made, this can just add to the tension and the passion. But some of these conundrums can be reduced, solved by recognizing and accepting the conundrum of them, whereby we realize we have to agree to disagree, and we can't really force that disagreement upon each other. Now, let me back up a bit, and let's talk a little bit about the background behind multi-axial versus monoaxial thinking so that I can explain it. I just need to grab one thing. I'll be right back. There we go. Now, most of us, as we grow up in our lives, we find ourselves in a family or in some sort of a situation where we are in a context whereby these are the people we are being influenced by as we grow up. And maybe we might be raised middle class, lower class, upper class. We might have a large extended family. We might have a small family. We might come from a neighborhood where where there's a lot of money or a little bit of money, regardless of where our parents are at. But we each come into life from different places, different standpoints. And for most of us, we're engaged in the process as we grow up of making sense of life, making sense of our environment, making sense of just what's going on. What is this life that I've been thrown at, that I find myself thrown toward reality, thrown toward a life, and I didn't even choose to be here. I'm just finding myself here, and I got to figure out what's going on. And what usually happens is this. There is within us a certain amount of natural, healthy tension when we find ourselves trying to make sense of circumstances that we're not yet ready to make sense of. However, for all of us, there will come a day when, for some of these confusions or questions, some of these aspects of dissonance, where we come to arrive at something that has some real coherence. We see an issue, and we finally find a coherent way of defining the issues, of understanding the solutions or the outlook on this, and develop some sort of a philosophy. And once we find that sense of coherence, this gives to us a certain relaxation of our questioning, a certain relaxation of our confusion, a certain relaxation of our sense of dissonance. And for most people, that's when we kind of sit back and relax and feel like, well, I've got this thing figured out. And that's what results in our becoming what I call monoaxial thinkers. That is, we tend to think about the issues of life, the issues that we need to make decisions on based on the challenges of our life, and the issues upon which we find we are asked to somehow take a side or come to a conclusion. We tend to settle in on the area where we first discover an emotion called coherence. And coherence is an emotion. When everything seems to fit together well enough, at least based on all of the facts that I'm familiar with, I find that there's this emotional settlement of peace that comes over me. And this peace relaxes me, thereby also demotivating me from thinking much further about the topic. And I'm basically done thinking about it. Now, I'll be done thinking about it because of the emotional coherence I've arrived at. This doesn't mean that I have really thought the issue through properly or used proper logic, or that I'm really aware of all of the relevant facts, or that I've really thought of a variety of different ways that it could be understood. It's just sufficient for me that I have found something that seems to fit well to me, that works for me. I want to argue that this is a very natural first step for all of us in becoming people who make sense of the world we live in. We all do that. But I'm suggesting that that is in some ways very childish. That when we become an adult, or as we're becoming an adult, we need to learn how to move forward out of that monoaxialism and realize that most of the opinions that we hold are really based upon a first found feeling of coherence. And unfortunately, what happens to us is after we find something that is for us coherent, we tend to treasure the sense of peaceful resolve that we have found as a result. We are very doubtful about any facts that are alleged that come along that begin to stir the pot back up again. Oh, no, 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 we're not going to go there. We can't do that. And so we tend to dismiss and resist any new information that comes toward us that might cause us to once again re-enter that state of either confusion or that state of dissonance or some other form of discomfort wherein we lack the coherence. And I think that part of what happens in the more mature person is we become more comfortable as time goes on with a lack of coherence. We become more comfortable with things being very sophisticated, very complex, to the point where we discover that reality is a little bit bigger than the way we've reduced it to the way we can understand it and master it. Now, in our lives, most of the things that we're doing can be handled and managed by coming to very superficial conclusions about things that allow you to master your life and your environment. And a lot of very successful people have done just that. They are, however, unfortunately, many times very narrow-minded. What happens as we, if we allow ourselves to mature and kind of go on to the next level, we begin to realize that the coherence that we have comes from the fact that everything that we know about a particular topic seems to fit together in an explanation. But a big part of that is that there's a lot about this issue we're not really thinking about, we're not aware of. People who are affected by this issue, perhaps, that we haven't really taken the time to empathize with. Maybe they're people who are not in our in-group. Consequently, for example, if you were raised in a wealthy home, you might have certain attitudes about people who are not as wealthy, about how they waste their money, how they do this, they do that, they sit on welfare, they do. And if you don't actually know some of these people and you don't actually work with some of these people and get to know some of these people, you can fill your head with a great number of what is for you coherent facts that are absolutely not based on any kind of verifiable reality whatsoever. But this does allow you to at least have this experience of coherence. As you get more mature, however, you discover that each of these standpoints of life represent to different people certain forms of what some people would call bounded rationality. That is, that we come up with a heuristic in life, a way of making sense of things that is really biased toward where we are coming from and what we experience. And that's all that it is. It isn't really a solid, truly well-rounded awareness of reality itself. I'm going to argue that reality is so big, so complex, and filled with so many features that there is not a single person alive capable of managing all that information and therefore knowing all of the relevant issues and having a final, wonderful working opinion that is actually absolutely good for everybody. That just can't happen. And we need to learn how to get along in this world based on the fact that each of us are dealing with a reduction of the information that could be available on any particular topic, or the reduction of information, some of it actually being unavailable to us, so that we can be a little bit more humble in the conclusions we find coherence holding on to. And so as we become more multi-axial in our thinking, here's the way that process works. I look at an issue in life, and I discovered that I finally come to a point of view that seems to fit well for me, that seems to just make sense from what I know. But then what I do next is I try to find some other vantage point, and I begin re-examining this issue from another vantage point to see if I might find that also leads to a different kind of conclusion, a different sense of coherence that is in somehow incompatible with or in contradistinction to the conclusion that I already found coherent. And if I am honest about this, if I'm really going to be honest about it, willing to do the hard work, I might actually find myself arriving at a conundrum where I can really appreciate how this issue makes sense this way. And I can also really appreciate how it makes sense that way. And what I am suggesting is that the multi-axial thinker is a person who grows comfortable with that conundrum. They have no need to resolve the conundrum unnaturally. Now, I'm not saying that we should remain in that conundrum forever, but we must remain in that conundrum as long as it is an honest conundrum. To move on from it is to be dishonest. To move on from it is to be willing to dismiss relevant information that fits together in a manner more complex than we are allowing the situation to be understood with. And so we're becoming willfully narrow-minded. So therefore, I think that it's important that we begin to appreciate a multiple set of views on a particular topic. This is one of the reasons why I say, if you're a conservative, you're narrow-minded. If you're a liberal, you're narrow-minded. If you're a libertarian, you're narrow-minded. If you're a socialist, you're narrow-minded. If there's any given philosophy of economy or politics or religion, and you aren't willing to go into the genuine conundrum of really appreciating why intelligent people can think of things in one of these other axes, then you're not really being as fully broad-minded and as honest with the issue as you can be. You should be able to be both conservative and liberal and libertarian and socialist and all of these other things. You should be willing to recognize that each of these are a different way of making sense of the world, making sense of the challenges, and offering different ways of solving some of these problems. And some of them are best suited to certain situations, and some of them are not. And that since all sorts of people come in all sorts of different backgrounds, what we really need to do, if we're going to be honest and if we're going to be fair, is to look for the kinds of solutions that maintain a sense of workable balance for all of the different active views that are currently going on in our culture and in our society, so that we are not necessarily interested in taking sides in some of these controversies. The failure to adopt multi-axial thinking is what leads to many controversies. Not all controversies are really caused by this, but a great number of them are. And here's some things I'd like to say about controversies. I believe that most controversies thrive on the fact that the people involved on both sides, or if there's more than two sides, that all of the people who take a position on any one of those numerous sides do so by being narrow-minded and dismissive of the merits of some of the things that cause people from the other side to feel that that is the side that makes sense. And so therefore, they're not allowing themselves to experience the conundrum. I think if I could give you a couple of examples, and here I risk something. I feel that so far I've been talking very theoretical, and I haven't, so I'm kind of abstract. I'm not giving you some concrete examples of what I'm talking about. And part of the reason I've done that is I wanted to, if I could, express the theory well enough that you might be getting on board with it before I got to some actual examples. And the reason is this: when I start talking about some of these examples, I'm likely to be talking about something you find controversial. And if I happen to take the position or a position that's different from the one you have, oh no, there you're gonna write me off. Instead of learning from this concept of multi-axialism and controversy, appreciating what's really the weaknesses that are often present in most controversies. So let me risk for a moment some of the controversies that we have in our culture. Now, In our culture, the most prominent controversies we have are in politics, religion, and sexuality. This is where most of the big, passionate controversies exist. But we have a lot of other controversies that we struggle with in our culture, such as age. Sometimes just we have controversies about what culture is itself, or what's really going on in the culture, who we are as a people. Everything from are we truly free? Is American exceptionalism a bona fide concept? Is the axis of evil really evil? Are we always the good guys? There's some of these cultural questions. We have controversies in theories of economics. We have controversies in concepts of approaching education. We have controversies in that deal with gender issues, law, the use of the military, race, and even some controversies in science. There are some controversies inside science, and there are a lot of controversies of people who are not trusting science, and what have you. Now, so our culture is loaded with controversy. And unfortunately, for people of faith have a long history and a strong tendency, once they have a faith, to try to embrace the world through a set of lenses that causes their faith to seem like it fits, and of dismissing any alleged facts, no matter how credible, that seem to confront that lens and make that lens something they can't use with honesty. And as a result, I think it's helpful for us to talk about this multi-axialism and the nature of controversy with people who have struggled with what it is to be theistic. Now, I am a theist. I'm a person who's theistic in my thinking. I acknowledge, I accept a life where I sense that God really is a God, that there really is a God. I sense his presence in my life daily. I also recognize, though, that this is a conclusion of coherence that I have risked, that I have come at. And I have to admit that the process that that has led me to that conclusion involves a great number of perceptual conclusions that cannot be validated or verified. And therefore, it's entirely possible that a lot of my conclusions are the wrong guess. This is part of why I call it faith. And I am happy and comfortable being what I sometimes label myself as an agnostic theist. I'm a person who, in terms of belief, I am a believer, but in terms of the verifiable knowledge, I recognize that I'm dealing with things that, from a standpoint of knowledge, I can neither confirm nor invalidate. And so, therefore, I am making a leap of faith in a direction. There either is or there isn't a God. This sense of presence that I have around me, the sense of the love of God that I have, is either real or imagined. And I can't prove which one it is. So from a standpoint of knowledge, I find myself having to be honestly agnostic. But from the standpoint of belief, I have risked my life in that direction, and I'm very comfortable doing it on even that flimsy amount of information, because I believe nobody, personally, I believe nobody has anything other than information that is exactly that flimsy, no matter what their decision is concerning God. Which, of course, certainly affects my conclusion about what God is like, because it would be absolutely brutal and useless and quite immature of God to require of us to be able to figure a lot of this stuff out when it can't be validated. That would be crazy. So I certainly don't believe in a God who requires me to understand him or to believe in him and to know all that other stuff. I just can't understand that as being even an honest way of even believing in God personally. Anyhow, these controversies can be regarded as taboo because of the bad feelings and the division that it can create. But let me venture into a few of them. How about the issue of, say, gun control? Now, I personally find that people on both sides of the issue of gun control, I personally think they are both dealing with a narrowed set of facts that cause both of them to live in a world of illusion, as if the only facts that really matter or that will ever come into play in the culture are the facts they want to believe in. And this is true whether they're talking about bringing in stronger gun control or want everybody to have guns. No matter what side of this controversy they're on, I find both sides to be wanting to dismiss what's going on and what all the relevant facts are. I think we have a wide variety of personalities and people in our culture. I think there's some people who really ought not to have guns, and I think there's a lot of people we'd be better off with if they did have guns. And I think that these people are different and respond differently to the way they perceive the world, so that it's not as if we have a one-size-fits-all solution for this. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is I find that the advocates of gun control have some relevant things to say that do come into play in very many ways. I also think that the people who advocate, these the Second Amendment rights, as they would put it, they also have some very meaningful things to say, and there are some very validated, verifiable facts that they also rely on, and that therefore we are in a situation that is, in my opinion, a genuine conundrum. And for each of us to be trying to passionately resolve this conundrum in one way or the other is for both sides to be fighting over something, in my opinion, that neither side has any right to be pushing upon the other. This is something we need to be continuing to investigate. There needs to be something we need to continue to think about, something where we might need to come up with solutions that are a little bit more sophisticated than the kinds of solutions we're trying to look at currently. Ones that respect the strengths, ones that acknowledge the weaknesses in both sides of this controversy. This is a controversy that is maintained by people who are willfully passionate over information they don't really have full access to. People who are willing to take a position even though they can't even decide what facts we all ought to be agreeing on. And it's particularly problematic because we're dealing with some of that minimal information. Let me think about another controversy that I would like to mention. Abortion is a huge controversy in our culture. This is, again, another area of controversy where I perceive many of the people on both sides of this issue to be dealing with an overly unrealistic, dishonest, narrow set of facts that bolster their position. That clear sense of right to life or that clear sense of right to choose. I think that both sides tend to dismiss the realities that come into play that are far more complex, and that this is a genuine conundrum. In some ways, a conundrum that I think that too many of us are being way too judgmental concerning. And I don't think we even have a really workable solution to this question. And I really think that we need to work harder at it. I'm a person who, where I'm at personally myself, I find it strange and regrettable that people can make a decision concerning abortion so easily, with so much shallowness. I find it dishonest that there's a number of people who make a decision to have an abortion and they're not honest with others about how later they might regret that or struggle with the guilt of that decision because they made a decision where they have to later admit they don't really know whether what they did was right or wrong. And I think it's very true that many women who have an abortion do report later that they struggle with having made a decision. They realize they don't really know if they did the right thing or not. They don't know. It's possible they made that decision dismissing the potential for that conundrum. And I think that it's possible that therefore they made that decision because of a passion for their right to make this decision themselves, and which I would totally uphold that they have every right to be making that decision themselves. But this is not a decision that is simply a personal decision. It goes deeper than that. It affects us more deeply than that. I think that the people who are the right to life are often approaching this from a very very abstract sense, where they're going to lose this battle the way they're fighting it, because they can't require of everyone to accept the assumptions they are basing their opinion on. They have no right, in my opinion, to control the decisions of a culture or society that are based upon opinions they possess that are neither verifiable or validatable so as to require them of everyone else. And I think that what we need to do, what would be better in that particular controversy, is to recognize that whether the people who have made those decisions should or shouldn't wonder later if they made the right decision or feel guilty about it, we need to at least be honest about the fact that many women who go through that decision are later conflicted about that decision. We need to be at least honest about it. And I think that if we're honest about it, this also frees other women who are in a position where being pregnant is a very real threat for whatever reasons. Where, if they make this decision, they can at least embrace that decision in the conundrum it was. Recognize it, even if they have to, as something that was regrettably wise. Whether that's now, certainly people on that right to life side can't appreciate that possibility. But then again, there's a sense in which I think that the one thing that is very true about the people on the free choice is, I hope you realize something. This decision doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people who have to make this decision. And that needs to be respected. So I actually see some very honest strengths on both sides of this controversy of the right to life and the right to choose. I see some real strengths on both sides, and I see some real weaknesses on both sides. And I think that many times we approach this controversy with way too much passion, thinking I need to dismiss all of those other facts the other side finds as relevant and say, nope, these are the plain facts, these are the foundational information, this is what really matters, and therefore this is the way we should be handling the issue. And all while we're doing this, trying to champion one side or the other. And I think that both sides often violate human beings by the way they handle this particular controversy. I don't think that a woman should be bullied into not making this decision, nor do I think she should be bullied into making this decision to preserve the right to make the decision, or to preserve the value of life at all costs or whatever. I really think that for people who are, unfortunately, in a situation where this is the kind of a decision they're really faced with, they need to work that decision through in a way where they can be honest and authentic and real about what it is they do know and what it is they don't know, and what it is that they are possibly going to face as a result of this decision, so they can make that decision intelligently, honestly, and moving also towards the strongest moral sense that they are able to understand from the standpoint. And even if that's a moral standpoint that I don't agree with, I have to recognize that there comes a point where this is not a decision that belongs to me. And so I have to accept the weakness of the position that I might be coming from. But this is another example of a controversy where I feel that people overly narrow the scope and fail to appreciate the kinds of dilemmas and conundrums that are entered into when a person is really going to be more multi-axial and appreciate both sides of the controversy in terms of what they do have to say that does make sense, that does have relevant value, instead of trying to just eliminate all the other inconvenient facts and try to push for just one. Now, there's a few things that we could talk about when it comes to controversy and trying to understand the dynamic of controversy. Of course, I see the solution to controversy as being a recognition of multi-axialism, of learning how to think in far more than one way, of coming to recognizing that the conclusion I make about any issue is really, the end is contained in the beginning. The lens that I use to look at an issue is usually going to determine how I'm going to resolve it. If I'm using a conservative lens, I'm going to, of course, end up defining it in a conservative way and solving it in a conservative way. If I'm looking at it through a liberal lens, I'm going to end up defining it in a liberal manner and finding my coherent solution in a liberal manner. And basically, my conclusions, my coherence, are really built into the lens that I use to first even look at the issue. And therefore, if I'm going to be an honest human being, what I really need to do is I need to use a multiplicity of lenses and appreciate how the way that I come at a topic, the particular ways, the rubrics or the paradigms that I use to make sense of an issue can lead me to different kinds of conclusions. And it also helps me to more strongly appreciate how much it is true that the end is contained in the beginning. And when I realize that, I find I have to move beyond the simple end contained in the beginning when it comes to making honest conclusions about controversial subjects. Something very difficult to do without a lot of practice and determination to be multi-axial. Now, there was an author who came up with something, Gregory Benford, and he came up with, I guess it was called his law of controversy. Basically, his law of controversy was something like this, that passion is inversely, I'm reading it here, passion is inversely proportional to the amount of verifiable information available. That is, that controversies tend to thrive and be stronger where people are passionately involved in what is actually a lack of verifiable information. People are operating from facts they're assuming, or things they're assuming to be in fact that may not actually be in fact, or they're dealing with a narrow set of facts, not aware of all of the facts that are really relevant to the topic at hand. And that the degree to which a person can be passionate is the degree to which they have overly narrowed the field that gives them this confidence to take a strong position, as if there's nothing that can keep me from taking this as the right position to take on this particular issue. The ability to do that so easily comes from having already cut yourself off, or already being cut off from information you're not even aware that you are cut off from. And so the passion in any controversy is inversely proportional to the absence, to these this amount of verifiable information that's available, so that we end up having stronger controversies where this information is just either lacking, unpursued, or unavailable for whatever reasons. We also find that many controversies will continue because both sides actually benefit from having the controversy remaining controversial. That is, that both sides sometimes find that they have a lot to gain by not really discussing the issue. Many times they can't get together and don't want to get together so as to determine what are the facts that we can both agree on? What are the facts that we can both validate? What are the facts that we can show are really only alleged or assumed, and therefore cannot be allowed to have as much strength in the conclusions that you reach, or recognize that since they are they can't be validated, that we have to realize we're working in kind of a soft reality here. We're not dealing with hard facts. We're dealing with possibilities. And therefore, when we're only dealing with possibilities, we cannot be constraining everybody to agree to the same set of possibilities. And therefore, we need to find the facts that we can agree upon from different sides of a controversy. Many times, people in a controversy don't want to do that. I think an example of that is the current absurd, and I would say unintelligent and extremely immature. I'm trying to find a nice way of saying it, but the current atmosphere between Democrats and Republicans is, in my opinion, repulsively immature. That these sides are also not really wanting to or open to. And I don't know, I'm not necessarily even blaming either side for this. They're just both very much caught up in their own passion. so that they're trying to discuss things from their own standpoint, not realizing that they're not even agreeing yet on what the relevant facts are. And they don't even want to talk about that. They just want to talk about their own talking points and make their own arguments and maintain their own narrowness. And this is going to lead nowhere except to stronger polarization and cause this controversy to divide us as a nation. And this division is caused by narrow-mindedness on both sides that is immature, unacceptable, and absolutely ridiculous, and the kind of thing that I hope that people could learn to be deeply embarrassed for participating in. The amount of, the passionate hatred of George Bush, the passionate hatred of Obama. This is absolutely absurd, ridiculous. It's stupid. I don't know what else to say about it. But it comes from people who are just refusing to be as thoroughly engaged in all of the relevant issues that might be involved in the very good things that might be said on various different sides of many different issues that do affect us all. Sometimes these controversies are particularly problematic where decisions have to be made. And many times in life, that is part of it. Many times in life, there's a time to make a decision, and not all of the relevant information is actually available at the time one ought to make a decision. Now, being a person who has pursued a multi-axial approach to life, I have found that pursuing a multi-axial approach to life has forced me to actually be the kind of a person who also tries to find the right time to make a decision. I don't try to make all my decisions as soon as I can. Some I do, some I don't. What I try to do is I try to gather as many facts as I can from a variety of different standpoints and points of view and through various lenses, and I will put off the decision until it's time to decide. And many times when it's time to decide, a lot of people, this is one of the problems that a lot of people who are monoaxial come to. Most people try to make their decisions based on when I have finally arrived at what I think the answer is, that's when I make the decision. I think that's an extremely immature way of making a decision. I think you should be making your decision based on when does this decision have to be made. That's when I will make this decision. I will not make it sooner, nor will I make it later. And if up to the moment in time where the decision has to be made, I am gathering all the facts, when that happens, when the moment comes that I have to make this decision, then I know I am making this decision based on incomplete information. But it's time to act, and it's time to move, and we need to do this now. And let's be honest and humble and cautionary in recognizing that the time to make the decision is now. Now, most people also have this, what I would call an emotional disconnect that is not workable. That if they feel that they can't make the decision made upon some decisive, absolutely incontrovertible and non-controversial position, they feel that they can't be decisive. I say no. Strong leadership recognizes that there comes a time to make a decision, and there also comes a time to implement a decision. You make the decision when it's time to make the decision, and the decision is made. And there's a time to implement the decision, and that's the time to be decisive. Decisiveness is a strategy for effective decision-making. Decisiveness is not a strategy for a person who's so damn cocksure of themselves that they're absolutely certain they could not possibly be wrong. That only leads to ridiculousness, because the truth is sometimes we can implement a decision that turns out to not work so well, and we need to be open to that as a possibility when that happens. Looks like we might have a viewer comment here. Okay, I don't see any way that anyone can move forward, can grow in life without a little controversy. Oh, I totally agree with that comment. Controversy is inevitable. What I am talking about is being comfortable with conundrum, being comfortable with a controversy, but also understanding that controversies thrive when people decide to polarize towards narrow-minded extremes. And that what we need to do is recognize that these controversies do exist, and they exist for reasons that do honestly prevent them from being quickly resolved. And we need to be honest about that. And yes, it's true. I think we need them, and it's a part of growing. It is, in fact, a call to us to really expand our view, to really take a broader view of things so that we can appreciate the various different competing interests that come to an issue in which there is a controversy. So I would definitely agree with that. We can't grow with, I don't know that we can't grow, but we do grow definitely as the result of the controversies we face if we can approach them multi-axially. Other viewer comment: shouldn't the Word of God be clear enough to resolve any controversy quickly? I don't see how, for many reasons. First of all words possess usage and domain of meaning, and everybody understands the domain of meaning and the usage of word based on their own personal history. And since each of us have a different personal history, I think it's an illusion that there is a clear sense of Scripture that can be argued for. Just because something feels clear to me doesn't mean it's equally clear to you, because you're coming from a different lens. And so therefore, I think this is an illusion, personally, that things can be clear enough in and of themselves. See, this comes from, in my opinion, the illusion that reality is directly approached by us. It isn't. All of us experience reality through our five senses. These five senses are triaged through perception, through the processing of our brain, through the rubrics, through the lenses that we have developed, the way we have biosemiotically organized reality, so that by the time we're even conscious of the things of reality, we've already triaged quite a bit away and triaged a great deal that's foregrounded into the front, so that what we end up thinking, seeing, and experiencing is in some ways already a distortion of reality. Clarity of that sort is an illusion based upon one's personal emotion of coherence, which just means that if everything makes sense to you based on what you know, that doesn't mean that everything makes sense. It just makes sense to you. And so therefore, I would advise against the notion that somebody could ever read the Bible or any text and that we could all come to an immediate, clear sense of what the text is actually saying quickly. No, we may find that think about it. You would think that without the Bible, isn't reality itself clear enough? No, it's not. It's far more complex than that. And if this kind of clarity were achievable, we would achieve it just by dealing with reality, and we don't, because it's really not that simple. There's a biosemiotic filter that we all have to work through, and that isn't going to be compromised by any efforts that we have. Another viewer comment here: you got to know when to hold them and when to fold them. Exactly. It's we have to make a lot of decisions in life based upon risks and probabilities and things like that. Let me just finish up here. We're almost out of time. Some of the things that are important to recognize about controversies. They're associated with a lack of confidence. From psychological standpoint, we notice that the people who are most passionate in controversies are people who demonstrate, even if they won't admit it, various different behaviors that are associated with people who are not honest with themselves about a confidence they actually lack, and they're compensating for it with a vigor that hides their lack of confidence, sometimes even from themselves. There's a heuristic knee-jerk reaction that we call bounded rationality, and that is our experience in life creates for us an initial impression of what things must be. And if we just stick to that, we don't realize that we're operating upon our common assumption based upon our own personal standpoint, our own personal place in life, our own station in life, our own economic, our own race, our own... I'm more intimately familiar with the risks I face than the risks you face. And so consequently, when thinking about various issues, I'm living in my own bounded rationality. And I also have to recognize that in controversies, there's loyalties of duress. People have a lot to lose if they take the wrong position based on the people they're associated with. They could lose their job. They might not be able to get into office. They might not be able to continue being in the ministry or whatever. There's a lot of loyalties that are involved that really complicate our honesty in dealing with controversies. I'm almost done here, and because I'm really out of time, let me just mention a few more points here. Narrow-minded dismissal of relevant problematic facts is a real serious problem in dealing with controversies. I've got some other notes notes here. Indecision and phobias, the fears that we have, the fears we have of making the wrong decision. These can complicate our ability to appreciate the conundrums and the time to make a decision. And our differing capacity to see things. Not all of us possess the same skills, the same abilities, the same critical thinking skills. And so consequently, it's not possible that we could all even arrive at the same conclusion. And we need to live in a world where that's true for all of us. Anyhow, I hope that this gave you some insights into the issues of multi-axial thinking and controversy. And thanks for spending some time with me tonight. We'll see you again. I'm Bob Greaves. They call me the Unconventional Bastard. And so it was good to spend some time with you. We'll see you later.
Ladies and gentlemen, did Bob Greaves say bastard enough for this during this show for you? I hope so. And we would like to thank Bob for his pledge to donate $100 to the New Covenant Group for every minute he went overtime. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Up here on the stage at the New Covenant Group, Dr. Michael W. Jones is going to be up here, and we're going to be talking about witnessing. What is it about witnessing, and how do we do so? How does it affect you when people witness to you, and how should we react to it? When is it right? When is it wrong? Stay tuned in just a moment. Stay with us.